So now we need to talk about how things move across that semi-permeable membrane. So there are two types of movement. Passive movement, or passive transport, and active transport. Passive transport, no outside energy needs to be supplied. Okay, so it's going to move with its own kinetic energy. So no energy is needed. In active transport, outside energy must be added. So when solutes move, when things move across the membrane, in passive transport, which is what we're going to talk about here, in passive transport, things move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And again, it's passive. We don't have to do anything to do it. If you have, for instance, a hill, and you put a ball at the top of the hill, and you just let it go, it's going to go down passively with its own kinetic energy. We don't have to push it. We don't have to do anything. It just falls down the hill, rolls down the hill. And the steeper the hill, the faster it'll roll. The less steep the hill, the slower it will roll. Okay? So we call that the concentration gradient. The steeper it is, the faster it'll go. The less steep it is, the slower it will go. So that is the gradient. Okay, so in passive diffusion, or in passive transport, we're talking about with the movement of solutes, we're talking about something called diffusion. Sorry. And this is the movement of solutes from a high concentration to an area of low concentration. Okay, and it does that until equilibrium occurs. So if you look at this part here, so we have this glass or beaker of water, okay, and we put a drop of something in it, drop of something with a bunch of solutes in it. So it's going to enter the fluid in a specific place, wherever I put the dropper. And then once it's there, the solutes in it are going to move. They're going to move around until there's solutes all over it and it's equal. That's diffusion. If you put food coloring and drop food coloring into clear water, it takes a second, but those solutes are going to move around until all the water's that color, purple or whatever color it is. Okay, so in a cell that we're showing here, this is diffusion. So here's my solute here in a high concentration, and there's none here. So the solute moves or starts to move into this area until it's equal. Now, does that mean there's no movement here now, that the particles are still? No, they're still moving. They're just moving equally. They're moving in and out equally. And so there's about the same number of particles on this side, on the extracellular side, as on the intracellular side. That is passive transport or diffusion. All right, diffusion can occur directly. This is direct diffusion. How is it direct diffusion? Because the particles are going right through the membrane into the intracellular space. Okay, that is direct diffusion. Who can do direct diffusion? All right, well, things that can do direct diffusion are oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. Okay, also fats, steroids, which those are just basically fats. Okay, but those things can go right on through the lipid membrane. Okay. Not all solutes can do this. Okay, so we have there's something called facilitated diffusion. And facilitated diffusion requires a protein. So we can either have a channel protein. So that's a protein in the membrane that is always open. So if we have a little channel, a little protein in here that's open, then things can always move because it's always open. So that's a channel protein. We can also use, or what also can be used, is a carrier protein. So this is a protein that will change its shape to guide a molecule into or out of the cell. So sometimes, there are particles that can come through that where the concentration is high on one side and low on the other, and it's going to move, but maybe they're too big. Like glucose is really a big molecule. So it will need some kind of carrier protein to bring it in. Okay, still diffusion, because we're going from a high to a low concentration, the particle is just too big to fit through. So it'll use this carrier protein to get it in. That's basically it for diffusion. Okay, and this is diffusion. When we're talking about diffusion, we're talking about solutes. Okay, the other type of diffusion is actually called osmosis. Osmosis is the movement of water. So osmosis, it's in a different color. So, okay, there it goes. Osmosis is the movement of water from a high concentration to a low concentration of water. And this is through a semi-permeable membrane. So when we're talking about a solvent, and when we're talking about solvents as far as the body, we're talking about water. So osmosis is the movement of a solvent, and we're always going to be talking about water, so you might as well just call it water. So movement of water from an area of high concentration to low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So when we look at this picture over here of osmosis, we have this beaker and it's full of water, and there's a semi-permeable membrane in here. So then we add solute in it, where we end up with more solute on one side than on the other. So we've got high solute here and low solute here. But the membrane is not permeable to the solute. Not permeable to the solute. So since it's not permeable to the solute can't move. It can't move over, it can't diffuse over to make things equal. It wants to, but it can't because it can't move. But the water can. So water from here, which is a high concentration of water here, will move over here. The concentration of water here is lower because there's more solute in it. Okay, so over here, this is equilibrium. And it's equilibrium because the ratio of solutes to water on this side is the same as the ratio of solutes to water on this side. They're equal. Like a half is equal to 2/4 is equal to 5/10. Those are all the same thing, right? That's what this is. So water will move when the solute won't, and it will move towards the solute to make it so that there's the same amount of water per solute on each side of the membrane. Please understand these concepts, and you must understand the difference between diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion, we're dealing with solutes, the movement of solutes. Osmosis, we're dealing with the movement of water. Okay, so the next video, I'm going to talk about active transport.